The night before Mother's Day, my mother removed me from our family WhatsApp group like she was crossing a typo off a grocery list. A minute later, my cousin Rachel sent me the screenshots. I was sitting on the edge of my bed in a one-bedroom apartment outside Harrisonburg, Virginia, still wearing my school cardigan. Papers from my fourth-grade class spread across the comforter when I read the words that changed everything. All my children made it except Ingrid. She chose to be just a teacher. She's no longer my daughter. There was a heart reaction under it from my sister. A short reply from my brother. No one defended me. No one even asked if I was okay. I remember staring at the screen so long that the light dimmed and my reflection floated over the message like a ghost. My own face looked unfamiliar. Not devastated. Not even angry. Just still. Like something inside me had stepped back and closed a door very softly. I didn't call my mother. I didn't beg. I didn't type out the kind of message people write when they still think being more clear will make cruel people kinder. I just sat there in the silence and realized that sometimes the worst pain in the world doesn't come with shouting. Sometimes it arrives in perfect punctuation. And the strangest part was, this wasn't the first time my family had made me feel small. It was just the first time they said it plainly. Before I go any further, if respect matters to you, subscribe. This story is not about revenge. It's about what happens when the quiet one stops asking to be chosen. My name is Ingred Fairbanks. At the time, I was 30 years old, a fourth-grade teacher, and according to my mother, the only stain on an otherwise polished family legacy. My mother, Margaret Fairbanks, cared about appearances the way some people care about oxygen. My sister Victoria was a plastic surgeon in Richmond. My brother Bradley was a corporate attorney in D.C. Between the two of them, my mother had everything she needed for country club introductions. And then there was me. No designer title, no luxury car, no husband with a firm. Just a teacher with dry erase marker on her sleeves, and a paycheck that disappeared almost as soon as it arrived. But I hadn't chosen teaching because I failed at becoming something else. I chose it because it was the first thing that ever felt true. I didn't arrive at that truth easily. Growing up, my future had already been written for me long before I understood I was allowed to have a say in it. In our house, success had a very specific shape. It wore tailored suits, drove German cars, and came with titles that made people pause just long enough to feel impressed. My mother didn't just admire that life, she curated it. Victoria fit the vision perfectly. By the time she was 30, she had her own practice, a waiting list of clients, and the kind of polished confidence that made people trust her before she even spoke. Bradley followed close behind, sharp, controlled, already talking like a partner before he officially became one. And then there was me, the last chance to complete the picture. In high school, I did everything right. Advanced classes, top grades, volunteer hours stacked neatly on college applications. When I got accepted into a pre-med program with a scholarship, my mother told everyone before I even had time to process it myself. "She's going to be a doctor," she'd say, smiling in that tight, satisfied way, just like her sister. But the summer before college, something shifted. I volunteered at a literacy program for kids who had already been labeled behind. There was one boy, Marcus Jr., who couldn't get through a single paragraph without shutting down. The first time he tried reading out loud, he kept apologizing between sentences, like struggling with something he needed forgiveness for. So we slowed down. One page at a time, one word at a time. Weeks later, he finished his first chapter book on his own. When he looked up at me, his whole face changed like someone had handed him permission to believe in himself. He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. That moment stayed with me in a way no test score ever had. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't something you could brag about at a dinner party. No one was going to clap for it. But it mattered. More than anything I had been working toward. The night I told my mother I was turning down the pre-med track, she went quiet. Not confused, just silent in a way that felt like something closing. "You're wasting your potential," she said finally. "I'm choosing something meaningful," I replied. "To who?" she asked. "Because it won't be to anyone who matters." That was the first time I understood that in her world, meaning and status were not just different, they were incompatible. She didn't come to my college graduation. Victoria mailed a short note and a check that covered maybe a week of groceries. Bradley sent nothing. And still, I told myself it would get better. That once they saw me build something real, something steady, they would understand. What I didn't realize yet was that I wasn't building something they wanted to understand. I was building a life they had already decided didn't count. At first, the distance didn't look like rejection. It looked like small things. Things you could explain away if you tried hard enough. The first time I noticed it clearly was Thanksgiving, the year before everything fell apart. I drove the 90 miles from my apartment with a casserole balanced carefully on the passenger seat, my grandmother's recipe, the one my mother used to say tasted like childhood. When I walked in, the house looked exactly the same. Polished wood floors, crystal already set out. My mother adjusting place settings like she was arranging a photo. For a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined the distance, until I saw the seating. The main table was full my parents, Victoria, Bradley, their spouses, all placed perfectly. My name wasn't there. Instead, a smaller folding table had been set up near the kitchen doorway. 3 chairs, paper napkins instead of linen. "Oh, Ingrid," my mother said lightly when she saw me looking. "We ran out of space at the main table." She smiled like it was nothing. "You're so good with children anyway." I followed her gaze. That smaller table was where the kids were sitting. I was 30 years old. I told myself it didn't matter. I laughed it off, sat down, helped the youngest cut her turkey. I stayed quiet when conversations from the main table drifted over investment talk, surgical conferences, vacation homes. No one asked me about my class. No one asked about my life. And I didn't offer, because something in me had already started shrinking to fit the space they gave me. Christmas was quieter, but sharper. I had spent 3 weeks knitting my mother a scarf. Not something flashy, just soft, careful. The kind of gift you make when you want someone to feel thought of. When she opened it, she paused just long enough for me to notice. "How handmade," she said. Then, she set it aside. Victoria handed her a designer clutch right after, and suddenly the room filled with admiration, texture, stitching, brand, price. My mother lit up in a way she never had for anything I brought into that house. Later that night, I found the scarf tucked into the coat closet, still folded, still untouched. I didn't say anything. I kept telling myself the same thing over and over, that families go through phases, that not everything means something, that I was being too sensitive. But the truth was quieter than that. I was being repositioned, not pushed out all at once, just gently moved further and further to the edge, until one day, there would be no space left for me at all. The last invitation I ever expected but somehow still hoped for came a few months later. My mother's birthday. I remember standing in my kitchen, phone pressed between my shoulder and ear, stirring a pot of soup I didn't really plan to eat. It was late afternoon, the kind of quiet hour where you can almost convince yourself things are normal. "What time is dinner?" I asked, trying to sound casual. There was a pause on the other end. Not long. Just long enough to feel deliberate. "Oh, Ingrid," my mother said, her voice soft in a way that used to comfort me. The restaurant only had 6 seats available. I waited. She didn't continue. "So," I said slowly, "who's going?" "Your father, of course, Victoria and her guest, Bradley and Carolyn." Another small pause. "You understand, don't you? 6 seats. 6 carefully chosen people. And somehow, I didn't fit into any of them." "Of course," I said. Because what else was there to say? I hung up, turned off the stove, and stood there for a long time staring at nothing. Not crying, not angry. Just empty in a way that felt almost clean. That was the moment something shifted. Not broken. Not dramatic. Just a quiet recognition that I was no longer being overlooked. I was being excluded. And the difference between those two things is everything. After that, I stopped trying as hard. Not in a way anyone would notice immediately. I still showed up when invited, still brought food, still smiled when it was expected. But I stopped reaching first. Stopped filling silences. Stopped trying to translate their behavior into something kinder than it was. Because deep down, I already knew where it was heading. I just didn't know how far it would go. Rachel was the only one who seemed to notice. She called me more often around that time. Small check-ins, random conversations that didn't really need a reason. "You okay?" she asked one night. "Yeah," I said automatically. She didn't answer right away. "You don't sound like it." I sat on my couch, pulling a blanket tighter around myself, even though it wasn't cold. "I think I'm just tired," I admitted. "Of what?" That question lingered, not because I didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud would make it real. Tired of feeling like I have to earn my place every time I walk into my own family, I said quietly. Rachel exhaled like she'd been holding that breath for a while. That's not how it's supposed to feel, she said. I let out a small, humorless laugh. I don't think they got that memo. There was a pause. Then she said something I didn't fully understand until much later. Then maybe it's not your job to keep proving it. At the time, I nodded even though she couldn't see me, but I wasn't ready to hear what that really meant. Not yet. Because some part of me still believed that if I just held on a little longer, they might finally choose me back. They didn't. Instead, they erased me. Completely. Cleanly. Like I had never been there to begin with. The night before Mother's Day, when Rachel called, I almost didn't answer. It was late, close to midnight, and I had just finished grading a stack of reading journals. My eyes were tired, my head heavy. But something in her name lighting up my screen made my stomach drop before I even picked up. Ingred. Her voice was already unsteady. I didn't know if I should tell you, but you need to see this. My chest tightened. What happened? Check your WhatsApp. I frowned, opening the app automatically, scrolling to the family group chat, or at least where it should have been. It wasn't there. For a second, I thought it was a glitch, that maybe the app hadn't loaded properly. I refreshed it, closed it, opened it again. Still gone. Rachel, I said slowly, I think something's wrong with my... They removed you, she whispered. The words landed softly, but they didn't soften anything. What do you mean? Removed? Your mom asked Victoria to do it a few days ago. She just did it tonight. Rachel's breath hitched. Ingrid, I'm so sorry. My fingers went cold around the phone. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because you deserve to know the truth, she said. And because no one else was going to tell you. My phone buzzed. One screenshot. Then another. Then another. I opened the first one, and there it was. My mother's message. Clear, direct, unapologetic. No confusion, no misunderstanding. Just a decision. A declaration. A removal. I stared at the words, reading them once, then again. Then again, like maybe repetition would change them. It didn't. Below it, Victoria had reacted with a heart. Just a heart. Not even a sentence. Bradley's reply was even shorter. Understood, Mom. That was it. Years of being their sister reduced to 2 words and an emoji. No one asked why. No one hesitated. No one said my name. The silence from everyone else in that group felt louder than anything they could have typed. I sat there on the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, the room so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, and I waited. Not for them to apologize. Not for a follow-up message. Just something. Anything that might suggest this wasn't real. Nothing came. Rachel stayed on the line with me, not speaking, just breathing softly like she knew words wouldn't help. After a while, I saved the screenshots. Every single one. I didn't know why at the time. I just knew I couldn't let this disappear like they had decided I should. Ingrid? Rachel said gently. Yeah, I'm here. I swallowed, my throat tight but still no tears coming. I know, I said. And then, after a long pause, I added the only thing that felt true. I think they mean it. I read those screenshots 47 times that night. Not because I didn't understand them, but because some part of me kept searching for a version of reality where they didn't mean what they clearly said. Maybe it was taken out of context. Maybe it was a joke that landed wrong. Maybe somehow I had missed something that would make it hurt less. But every time I read it, the meaning stayed the same. Cold, direct, final. By 2 in the morning, my eyes burned, but I still hadn't cried. I sat there with my back against the wall, phone resting in my lap, staring at nothing. And slowly, something inside me began to settle. Not heal, not even accept, just settle. Like the moment after a storm when the wind dies, but everything is still broken around you. I realized something then. If I called her, she wouldn't deny it. She would explain it. She would tell me why I deserved it. And I didn't think I could survive hearing that out loud. So I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't ask for clarity. Because there was nothing unclear about what she had written. Morning came quietly. No missed calls. No messages. No, we should talk. Mother's Day arrived like any other Sunday sunlight through the blinds, the distant sound of someone mowing their lawn, the world continuing as if nothing had shifted. But everything had. For the first time in my life, I didn't send my mother flowers. I didn't call to wish her a happy day. I didn't drive 90 miles to sit at a table where I was barely acknowledged. Instead, I made coffee, sat by the window, and let the silence exist without trying to fill it. It felt wrong at first, like I was breaking a rule I had followed my entire life. But as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. The guilt didn't grow. It faded. In its place was something unfamiliar: space. I went for a walk along the creek behind my apartment that afternoon. The water moved steadily over the rocks, sunlight catching on the surface in small flashes. I stood there for a while, just watching it, thinking. I had options. I could call her and demand an explanation. I could confront her, force her to say it again, this time directly to me. I could show up at that Mother's Day dinner uninvited, make it impossible for them to pretend I didn't exist. I could even post the screenshots, let everyone see the truth behind the polished version of our family. But every option led back to the same thing. Still trying to be seen by people who had already decided not to see me. That realization settled deeper than anything else, so instead, I did something much quieter. I went home, picked up my phone, and blocked her number, then Victoria's, then Bradley's, one by one. Not out of anger, not to punish them, but because for the first time, I understood something I hadn't before. Silence wasn't always weakness. Sometimes, it was the clearest boundary you could set. And that day, I chose mine. The world didn't stop when I disappeared from my family. That was the first strange thing I noticed. Monday morning still came. My alarm still went off at 6:15. I still stood in front of 22 fourth graders who didn't care about last names or status or who got invited to dinner. They just cared if I showed up. So I did. I taught fractions that week. Reading comprehension. We worked through a story about a girl who felt invisible in her own house. And halfway through the lesson, one of my students raised his hand and said, "Why doesn't anyone notice her?" I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "people only see what they expect to see." He nodded like that made sense, and we kept going. It became easier than I expected, not talking about it. No one at work knew. I didn't tell my colleagues. Didn't mention it in passing. Didn't let it slip in the staff lounge over reheated coffee. Because how do you explain something like that? My mother decided I wasn't her daughter anymore. Doesn't fit neatly into conversation, so I carried it quietly. But silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. 6 months later, Rachel called again. "Thanksgiving photos are up," she said. I closed my eyes. I told myself I wouldn't look. "Yeah," she said softly. "Me too." I lasted 2 hours. That night, I downloaded Instagram again and found Victoria's post. The photo was perfect. Of course it was. My mother at the head of the table, smiling like nothing in her world had ever been out of place. Victoria beside her, polished as always. Bradley across from them, glass raised mid-toast. Everything symmetrical. Everything curated. Everything complete. Except it wasn't. There was no empty chair. No gap. No sign that anyone was missing. They hadn't adjusted around my absence. They had erased it. The caption read, "Grateful for my amazing family." I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because I believed it, but because I was trying to understand how easily a person could rewrite reality when it was inconvenient. I deleted the app again that same night. After that, I stopped checking. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I finally understood that looking wouldn't change anything. December came and went. Then January. Then February. And through all of it, I built a life that didn't include them. Quietly, slowly, without announcement. Rachel stayed in touch though. She became my only window into that world I had stepped out of. "One more thing," she said during a call sometime in early spring. "What?" I could hear hesitation in her breath. "Your mom's been telling people you're doing some kind of international teaching work." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "She's saying you're in Africa, working with underprivileged kids, some nonprofit, very prestigious." I let out a small, dry laugh. "I haven't left Virginia in 3 years." "I know," Rachel said. "But she's been telling everyone that, at the club, at events, like it's this big accomplishment." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. And that's when it clicked. "She didn't erase me," I said slowly. "What?" "She replaced me." Rachel was quiet. "With a version she can be proud of," I continued. One that fits the story she wants to tell. The real me, the teacher in a small rural school, the daughter she had called lowly, didn't serve her image. So she created one that did. A version of me that was impressive. And, conveniently, absent. I sat there for a long time after we hung up, thinking about that. Not angry, not even surprised, just clear in a way I hadn't been before. I wasn't a daughter she lost. I was a narrative she edited. I met Marcus Webb on a Tuesday that smelled like hay and early fall. It was a school field trip, pumpkins, dirt paths, kids already louder than the bus driver could handle. Maple Creek Elementary did this every year, and I had signed up without thinking much about it, just another day outside the classroom. But some days don't announce what they're about to become. They just begin. Marcus was standing near a tractor when we arrived, sleeves rolled up, hands dusted with soil like it belonged there. He wasn't polished, not in the way I had grown up around. No performance. No need to impress. Just present. "You must be Miss Fairbanks," he said, offering his hand. His grip was firm, steady, his eyes kind in a way that didn't feel practiced. "My daughter talks about you all the time." "Lily?" I smiled. "She's wonderful." Lily was 5. Bright, curious. The kind of child who asked questions that didn't have easy answers. I had been helping her after school a couple times a week, mostly reading, sometimes just sitting with her when the day felt too big. Her mother had passed the year before. Marcus didn't say that right away. But you could feel it in the way he watched her, like he was trying to be enough for 2 people at once. "She says you're her favorite teacher," he added. "I'm not even technically her teacher," I said. "Doesn't seem to matter to her." That stayed with me. The way he said it. Simple, observing, no judgment. The day moved on like any other field trip, kids running between rows of pumpkins, teachers calling out reminders, laughter carried by the wind. But every so often, I would catch Marcus watching from a distance, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, just aware. After the trip, he thanked me again. Then, a few days later, he called. Said Lily had been asking if I could come by the farm sometime, maybe read with her there instead of at school. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because my life had become very contained, safe in its predictability, small in a way that didn't invite new variables. Still, I said yes. The first time I went out to the farm, it was quiet in a way my apartment never was. Open land, wind moving through trees, the kind of space where your thoughts don't echo, they stretch. Lily ran to me the moment I stepped out of my car. "You came!" Like it wasn't something small. Like it mattered. We read under an old oak tree that afternoon, her voice stumbling over words, then finding them again. Marcus brought out slices of apple pie halfway through, setting them down without interrupting. Later, when Lily ran off to chase something only she could see, Marcus sat across from me on the grass. "Can I ask you something?" he said. I nodded. "Where's your family?" The question landed softly. I didn't look away. "I don't have one," I said. Then, after a pause, "Or they decided they don't have me." He didn't react the way most people do. No immediate sympathy. No awkward reassurance. He just nodded. Like he understood that some truths don't need fixing. "Family isn't always blood," he said after a moment. "Sometimes it's just the people who stay." I looked at him then. Really looked. And for the first time in a long while, that idea didn't feel like something people say to make you feel better. It felt possible. What started with Lily became something I didn't expect. Not quickly. Not all at once. Just gradually. I kept coming back to the farm. At first, it was just for her reading sessions, small lessons, the kind of quiet consistency kids need when their world has already changed too much. But over time, those visits stretched. An extra hour. Then a shared meal. Then conversations that had nothing to do with school. Marcus never pushed. Never asked for more than what I offered. He just made space. And I realized how unfamiliar that felt. No expectations tied to status. No measuring. No quiet comparisons. Just presence. One afternoon, after Lily had gone inside for a nap, we sat under that same oak tree. The air was still, the kind that makes everything feel suspended for a moment. "You're different here," he said. I looked at him. "Different how?" "Lighter," he replied. "Like you don't have to prove anything." I let out a soft breath. I didn't realize how tired I was of doing that, I admitted. He nodded like that made complete sense. "You don't owe anyone that," he said. The words landed deeper than I expected. Because I had spent most of my life believing the opposite. That love had to be earned. That belonging came with conditions. That if I just worked hard enough, became enough, I would eventually be chosen. But sitting there with no one asking me to be anything other than exactly who I was, that belief started to loosen. Not disappear. Just loosen. Time moved forward in quiet ways. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into routines. Lily started calling me before I even arrived, asking how long until I got there. And one evening, without thinking, she ran toward me and said, "Mom," before stopping herself mid-step. Her face went still. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean." "It's okay," I said gently. And it was. Because something about it didn't feel wrong. It felt like a glimpse of something that hadn't existed in my life before. Not perfect. Not complicated. Just whole. Marcus watched that moment from a distance. He didn't step in, didn't correct her, didn't make it into something bigger than it needed to be. Later that night, as I was getting ready to leave, he walked me to my car. "She's been through a lot," he said quietly. "I know. She doesn't attach easily." I looked back toward the house, where Lily's silhouette moved behind the window. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. The words surprised me as soon as I said them. Not because they weren't true, but because I hadn't realized I was ready to mean them. Marcus studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Good," he said, "because neither are we." That was the first time someone had included me in something without hesitation. Not as an afterthought. Not as a maybe. But as part of a we. And for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt like I was stepping into a life that didn't need to be earned. Just lived. 2 years passed in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. The kind of steady that doesn't demand your attention, but quietly rebuilds something inside you while you're busy living. Marcus and I got married on a warm afternoon under the oak tree. No country club. No guest list curated for appearances. Just a handful of people who actually knew us, friends from the school, neighbors from the farm, Rachel standing off to the side with tears in her eyes like she had been waiting for this version of my life to arrive. Lily scattered petals in front of us, taking her job very seriously, her small hands gripping the basket like it mattered more than anything. And maybe it did. Because that day wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about showing anyone what I had become. It was about standing in a place where I was already accepted and choosing to stay. Later that year, the adoption became official. I still remember the way Lily handed me a drawing afterward, 3 stick figures under a bright yellow sun. "This is us," she said. Her voice was certain. No hesitation. No question. I kept that drawing. Still do. Because there are days when the world gets loud again, when expectations creep in, when old thoughts try to return, and I need something simple to remind me what's real. I went back to school too. Night classes. Weekend assignments. Papers written at the kitchen table after Lily went to bed. Marcus falling asleep on the couch with the TV still on low. It wasn't glamorous. No one was applauding. But it mattered. Not because it proved anything to my family, but because it was mine. When the assistant principal position opened at Maple Creek, I applied without overthinking it. The interview was quiet, professional. Marcus recused himself from the process entirely, not even sitting in the room. I got the job anyway, not because of who I knew, but because of what I had built. And through all of it, I stayed invisible. No social media. No announcements. No quiet updates sent through extended family. Not out of fear, just clarity. They had made their choice, and I had made mine. Somewhere, my mother was still telling people I was overseas, doing something impressive enough to explain my absence. Somewhere, my sister was still posting curated photos of a family that no longer included me. Somewhere, my brother was still living a life where I didn't exist. And for the first time, none of that reached me. Because I wasn't waiting for them to notice anymore. I was too busy building something they had never been part of. A life that didn't shrink me. A family that didn't measure me. A version of myself that no longer needed to be chosen. And I didn't know it yet. But that quiet life I had built, that distance I had protected, was about to be interrupted. Not by conflict. Not by confrontation. But by something I hadn't planned for at all. Recognition. The kind you can't keep hidden, even if you try. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, right in the middle of dismissal. Kids were lining up, backpacks half-zipped, voices bouncing off the hallway walls. I was standing by the classroom door, reminding one of my students for the third time not to forget his reading folder, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something, maybe instinct, maybe timing, made me step into the hallway and answer. Hello, this is Ingred Webb. The name still felt new sometimes. Earned. Real. Mrs. Webb. The voice on the other end was formal, precise. This is Diane Morrison from the Virginia Department of Education. Do you have a moment? My grip tightened slightly around the phone. Yes, I said, stepping further away from the noise. I'll be brief. The board has completed its review, and I'm calling to inform you that you've been selected as the new superintendent for Clark County. For a second, the words didn't land. Not fully. Superintendent? I repeated, like saying it out loud might help it make sense. Yes, ma'am. Your work in literacy development, teacher retention, and community outreach stood out significantly. The recommendation came through unanimously. I leaned back against the wall, my legs suddenly unsure of themselves. Are you certain? I asked quietly. A soft pause on the other end. Very, she replied. Dr. Eleanor Hart personally endorsed you. She described you as one of the most impactful educators she's worked with. Eleanor. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but hearing her name grounded something. Official details will follow via email, Diane continued. But we wanted to extend the offer directly. Congratulations, Mrs. Webb. Thank you, I said, still trying to catch up to the moment. When the call ended, the hallway noise rushed back in like I had just stepped out of a different world. Superintendent. 12 schools. Thousands of students. An entire district. I stood there for a long time, phone still in my hand, watching my students walk past me without noticing anything had changed. And that was the strange part. Everything had changed. But nothing looked different. That night I told Marcus first. He didn't react immediately, just looked at me for a second, like he was making sure I was serious. Then he smiled. Not wide, not loud. Just proud. I knew it, he said simply. Lily didn't fully understand what the title meant, but she hugged me anyway. Does that mean you're still my mom? She asked. I laughed softly, pulling her closer. Always, I said. A small article ran in a local paper 2 weeks later. Nothing major. Just a short piece about a teacher stepping into a leadership role. A photo. A name. A headline that didn't try too hard. I didn't think much of it. Didn't share it. Didn't save it. I assumed it would pass quietly like everything else I had built. I was wrong. Rachel called that night, her voice already carrying something I hadn't heard in a long time. Urgency. Ingred, she said. You need to hear this. My stomach tightened slightly. What happened? There was a pause. Then, Victoria posted the article, in the family group chat. Silence settled between us. Isn't this our Ingred? Rachel read aloud. I closed my eyes. 4 years of silence. And that was how they came back. I didn't respond to the message. Not in the group, obviously. Not to Rachel. Not to anyone. But something shifted the moment I heard those words. Isn't this our Ingred? Not how is she? Not why haven't we heard from her? Not we were wrong. Just recognition when it became convenient. Like finding an old photo of something you forgot you owned and suddenly deciding it still had value. What did Mom say? I asked, finally. Rachel exhaled softly. Nothing in the chat. Nothing? No. But, she hesitated. She called Victoria right after. I was at Aunt Patricia's. I heard part of it. I waited. She wasn't happy, Rachel continued. Not proud. Not surprised. Angry. A small, tired breath left me. That sounds about right. She kept saying things like, why didn't I know about this? And, how long has she been back in Virginia? Back. As if I had ever left. As if she hadn't erased me herself. She's upset because she's been telling people you're overseas, Rachel added quietly. Now there's proof you've been here the whole time. There it was. Not concern. Not regret. Just inconvenience. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. She doesn't want me back, I said slowly. She wants control of the story again. Rachel didn't argue. Because she knew it was true. 3 days later, the email came. The subject line was simple. From your mother. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Not because I didn't know what it would say, but because I did. My dearest Ingrid. It began. I almost closed it right there. But I kept reading. I saw the wonderful news about your promotion. I always knew you had it in you. We should meet for lunch soon. I would love to hear everything about what you've been doing. Mother's Day is coming up, and it would mean so much to have the whole family together again. I read it twice. Then a third time. Looking for something. An apology. A single sentence that acknowledged the past. There wasn't one. Not a mention of the message. Not a reference to the 4 years of silence. Not even a hint that anything had gone wrong. Just an invitation. As if I had been away. As if I had chosen the distance. As if we were picking up a conversation that had simply paused. I closed my laptop slowly. Marcus was standing in the doorway watching me. Her? He asked. I nodded. What did she say? I let out a quiet breath. Lunch, I said. Mother's Day. The whole family. He didn't respond immediately. Just stepped into the room leaning against the wall. And? He asked. I looked at the screen again. At the words my dearest Ingred. At the version of reality she had rewritten so effortlessly. There's no apology, I said. Marcus nodded once. Then there's your answer. I knew that. I did. But knowing something and feeling it settle are two different things. Because even after everything, there was still a part of me, small, quiet, stubborn, that wondered what it would be like if she had meant it. 2 weeks later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I stared at it longer this time. Long enough for it to almost go to voicemail. Then I answered. Hello? A pause. Then, Ingred, it's Victoria. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Careful. Like she had practiced it. I know it's been a while, she continued quickly, but I wanted to reach out personally. Mom's been asking about you. She really wants to see you. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tightening slightly around the phone. What's wrong with her? I asked. Because concern usually comes with a reason. There was a brief hesitation. Nothing serious, Victoria said. Just stress. You know how she gets. I almost smiled at that. No, I thought. I know exactly how she gets. She misses you, Ingrid, Victoria added. We all do. The words hung there, light, polished, empty. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I listened. Not to what she was saying, but to what she wasn't. No apology. No acknowledgment. No mention of the message that had erased me. Just an invitation wrapped in sentiment. Victoria, I said finally, my voice even. Why now? Another pause, shorter this time. Well, with everything going on, your new position, it just felt like the right time to reconnect. There it was. Not hidden. Just framed differently. I closed my eyes for a second. So, this is about timing, I said. It's about family, she corrected gently. No, I replied. It's about visibility. Silence. I could almost hear her recalculating. You're reading into this too much, she said after a moment. Mom just wants things to go back to normal. Normal. I let the words sit in my mind. Tried to remember what that had ever meant in our family. Being tolerated. Being measured. Being quietly dismissed. I don't think we have the same definition of that, I said. Victoria exhaled, a hint of frustration slipping through. Ingrid, you're holding on to something that happened years ago. I opened my eyes. 4 years, I said. Exactly. Don't you think it's time to move on? Move on. The phrase people use when they don't want to look at what they did. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't argue. I just asked one question. Has Mom apologized? Silence. Not hesitation. Not confusion. Just absence. Because we both knew the answer. That's what I thought, I said quietly. People don't always say things the right way, Victoria replied quickly. But that doesn't mean she didn't. She said I wasn't her daughter anymore. I cut in, still calm. There's a right way to say that? Victoria didn't answer. Because there isn't. We stayed on the line for a few seconds longer. Neither of us speaking. Then she softened her voice again. You're really not going to come? She asked. I looked out the window. At the life I had built. At the quiet that no longer felt empty. I'm not coming back to something that never made space for me, I said. Another pause. This one heavier. Mom's not going to understand that, Victoria said. I know, I replied. And then, gently, but I do. I ended the call. And for the first time since they reached out, I didn't feel conflicted. Just clear. Completely, finally clear. I wish I could say that clarity stayed untouched. That once I made that decision, everything inside me settled into place and never wavered again. But that wouldn't be true, because healing isn't a straight line, and distance doesn't automatically mean peace. A few days after that call, the doubts started creeping in. Quiet at first, then louder. At work, people kept congratulating me. Parents, teachers, staff, everyone had something kind to say. My new role had spread through the district, and suddenly, I was the person people looked to for answers. "You must be so proud," one of the teachers said. "I bet your parents are telling everyone." I smiled, nodded, changed the subject. But that question stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. That night, after dinner, I sat at the kitchen table while Marcus washed dishes. Lily was working on her homework nearby, humming softly to herself. "You're somewhere else," Marcus said without turning around. I didn't respond right away, just stared at the same spot on the table like it might give me clarity. "Victoria called," I said finally. The water kept running. "And?" "She said Mom misses me. That maybe it's time to move on." Marcus turned off the faucet. The silence that followed felt intentional. "What do you think?" he asked. I let out a slow breath. I hesitated. "I think I'm tired of carrying this." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Carrying what?" "The distance, the tension, the finality of it." I swallowed. "She's still my mother." Marcus didn't interrupt, didn't rush in with advice. He just waited. "And part of me keeps wondering," I continued, my voice softer now. "What if I'm being too rigid? What if I should just let it go?" "Let what go?" he asked gently. "The past." He held my gaze for a moment, then walked out of the kitchen. I frowned slightly, confused. A minute later he came back with his laptop. He placed it on the table in front of me and opened a folder. It was labeled simply, Ingrid. Inside were files. Dozens of them. Screenshots, photos, timestamps. My chest tightened as I recognized the first image. My mother's message. The one from 4 years ago. Unchanged. Undeniable. Then another. Victoria's post from Thanksgiving. The caption. The image where I didn't exist. Then more. Messages Rachel had forwarded. Small pieces of evidence I had tried not to revisit. "I saved everything," Marcus said quietly. I looked up at him. "Why?" "Because I knew this day would come." "What day?" "The day you'd start wondering if it wasn't that bad." His voice wasn't harsh, just certain. I looked back at the screen. At the words I had read dozens of times before. Only now, they felt different. Not sharper, just clearer. "You didn't imagine any of this," Marcus continued. "You didn't overreact. You didn't walk away for no reason." I felt something in my chest shift. Not pain, not doubt. Something steadier. "You built a life without them," he said. "Not out of spite, out of necessity." He sat across from me, his voice softer now. "You don't owe anyone a return just because they decided it's convenient." I closed the laptop slowly. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The noise in my head, the questions, the what-ifs had quieted. Not completely, but enough. Enough to hear the truth again. "I wasn't too harsh," I said. "No," Marcus replied. "You were finally honest." And for the first time in days, that felt like something I could stand on. I thought that was the end of it. That once I had my clarity back, the rest would stay quiet. But 3 days later, Rachel called again. And this time, her voice wasn't just tense. It was urgent. "Ingrid, you need to hear this before it happens." My stomach tightened instantly. "What is it?" "I got screenshots," she said, "from the family group." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because I already knew. "They're planning to come to your ceremony," she continued. "The state event, the one next month." I sat down slowly. "What do you mean, planning?" Rachel exhaled. "Your mom found out it's going to be televised. She told everyone they're attending, that they'll sit in the family section." My chest went still. "Family section," I repeated. "Yeah." A pause. "Ingrid, she's acting like none of it ever happened." "Of course she is," I said quietly. But Rachel wasn't finished. "There's more." I closed my eyes briefly. "Send it." My phone buzzed seconds later. I opened the screenshot. And there it was. My mother's message. Bright, confident, certain. "Wonderful news. Ingrid is being honored at the State Teacher of the Year ceremony next month. It will be televised." Below that, "Will arrive early, sit in the family section, and join her on stage for photos. My jaw tightened. I kept reading. Victoria, wear your red Valentino. Bradley, bring Carolyn. This is a great opportunity to show that the Fairbanks family stands together. An opportunity. Not a reunion. Not an apology. An opportunity. Victoria replied first. Already picked my dress. Should I bring flowers? Bradley followed. I'll adjust my schedule. Good visibility. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading it once, then again, slower, as if I needed to fully absorb what I was looking at. Not a single message asked if I wanted them there. Not one acknowledged the past. Not one even pretended this was about me. It was about optics, about reclaiming a narrative they had lost control of. They're going to try to stand next to you like they supported you the whole time, Rachel said quietly. I didn't respond, because there was nothing to argue with. It was all right there. They think this fixes everything, she added. No, I said finally. They think this hides everything. Silence settled between us. What are you going to do? Rachel asked. That question lingered, not because I didn't have options, but because for the first time, none of those options felt urgent. I could call and tell them not to come. I could contact the organizers, make sure they were blocked at the door. I could confront them before the event, force a conversation they had avoided for 4 years. But every one of those paths led back to the same pattern. Me reacting, me adjusting, me making space for them again. I looked down at the screenshot one more time, at the word opportunity, and something inside me went very still. They can come, I said. Rachel paused. What? They can sit in the audience. They can wear whatever they want. They can smile for cameras. I took a slow breath. I'm not stopping them. Ingred, are you sure that's a good idea? Yes, I said, because now I understood something I hadn't before. Control doesn't come from blocking people out. It comes from deciding what they no longer get to define. They want a moment, I said quietly. Rachel didn't interrupt, so I'll give them one. Not loud. Not messy. Not dramatic. Just true. And this time, I wouldn't disappear. That night after Rachel hung up, the house felt unusually quiet. Lily had already gone to bed, her nightlight casting a soft glow down the hallway. Marcus was outside finishing up in the barn, leaving me alone at the kitchen table with my thoughts and the screenshots still open on my phone. I read my mother's message one more time. This is a great opportunity. Not I miss her. Not I was wrong. Just strategy. I set the phone down and stared at the blank notepad in front of me. My speech. I hadn't written it yet. I picked up a pen, then paused. What do you say in a moment like that? What do you say when the people who erased you are sitting in the audience, waiting to be included in a story they never helped build? I wrote one sentence, then stopped, crossed it out, started again. Because I realized something important in that silence. This wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about exposing them. It was about telling the truth, without raising my voice. Marcus came in a few minutes later, wiping his hands on a towel. You okay? He asked. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said. And for the first time since the screenshots arrived, I actually meant it. The morning of the ceremony felt calm. Not the kind of calm that comes from everything being easy. The kind that comes when you've already made your decision, and there's nothing left to debate. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the front of my navy dress. Simple, clean. Nothing that tried too hard. Marcus adjusted his jacket behind me. You ready? He asked. I met his eyes in the reflection. Yeah, I said. I am. Lily ran into the room a second later, shoes half on, excitement written all over her face. Mom, is today the big day? I smiled, crouching down to fix her strap. It is. She grinned. Are you going to be on TV? Probably, Marcus said, laughing softly. Lily gasped like that made it the most important day in history. You're famous, she whispered. I shook my head gently. No, I said, just doing my job. We drove to the venue together, the car filled with small talk and Lily's endless questions. But underneath it all, there was a quiet awareness sitting with me. They would be there, not as family, not as support, just present. When we arrived, the building stood tall and bright under the morning light. People were already gathering: educators, staff, families. I signed in, pinned my name badge, took a slow breath, and stepped inside. not as the daughter they erased, but as the woman they could no longer ignore. The room was already full. Rows of chairs stretching across the chamber, soft conversations layered over the low hum of microphones being tested. Cameras were set up near the back, red lights blinking, ready. I walked in with Marcus beside me and Lily holding my hand. No hesitation. No scanning the room for familiar approval. Just forward. Our seats were in the front row reserved, a small card with my name printed neatly across it. Ingred Fairbanks Webb. I noticed the name, not because it felt strange anymore, but because it felt complete. Lily climbed into her seat, her feet swinging slightly above the floor. Marcus sat on my other side, steady as always. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "I am." And I was. Not because the past had disappeared, but because it no longer decided how I showed up. A voice echoed near the entrance behind us. Polished, confident, familiar. "I'm her mother," Margaret Fairbanks said. "I need to be seated closer." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel them arriving, the shift in the room, the subtle attention that followed people who knew how to take up space. Heels on marble, fabric moving, presence. They took their seats behind us. Close enough to be seen, close enough to be associated, not close enough to matter. Victoria leaned forward slightly. "Ingrid," she said softly, like we were picking up a conversation from yesterday. I kept my eyes on the stage, didn't respond. A hand touched my shoulder briefly. "Bradley, aren't you going to say hello?" he asked. I turned just enough for my voice to carry. "My family is right here," I said calmly, glancing at Marcus and Lily. Then I faced forward again, and let the distance stay exactly where it belonged. When my name was called, the room shifted. Applause rose, not loud at first, but steady, building as I stood and walked toward the stage. Each step felt grounded, like I wasn't carrying anything behind me anymore. Dr. Eleanor Hart stood at the podium, her presence calm and assured. "In 15 years, she began, "I've seen many educators dedicate themselves to this work, but some don't just teach, they transform the spaces they enter." I kept my eyes on her, but I could feel it. The attention, the weight of the room. Behind me, them. "She built her career without shortcuts," Eleanor continued. "Without noise. Just consistency, integrity, and a belief that every child deserves to be seen." A small pause. "And she built her family the same way." The camera turned. Not behind me, but to the front row. "Marcus." "Lily." Lily waved slightly, then covered her mouth, embarrassed. Marcus smiled, steady and proud. Eleanor gestured toward me. "Please welcome your 2024 Virginia Teacher of the Year, Ingred Fairbanks Webb." The applause rose again, stronger this time. I stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, looked out at the room, and for a moment everything went quiet. Not outside. Inside. "I want to thank my family," I began. A shift behind me. Expectation. I didn't turn. "My husband, Marcus," I said, my voice steady. "Who stood beside me when I had nothing to prove." A breath. "My daughter Lily, who reminds me every day what unconditional love looks like." I paused. That was it. No additions. No corrections. No reaching backward. Behind me, a chair moved. Then, "Ingrid." My mother's voice, sharp enough to cut through the room. I turned, just once, met her eyes, and said, calmly, "You told everyone I was no longer your daughter." Silence fell instantly. "I'm just honoring what you decided." No anger. No volume. Just truth. And this time, I didn't shrink from it. For a second, no one moved. Then the silence broke, not with chaos, but with a single clap. Somewhere in the middle rose. Then another. And another. Until the entire room rose, not for drama, but for something quieter. Understanding. I didn't look back again. I finished my speech, stepped away from the podium, and walked straight toward Marcus and Lily. Lily reached for my hand immediately. "You did it, Mom," she whispered. I smiled. Not because I had won anything, but because I hadn't lost myself. Behind us, I could feel it, the weight of a story my mother could no longer control. And for the first time, I didn't need her to rewrite it. If you know what it feels like to choose your peace over keeping the peace, tell me where you're listening from.